Hey guys, I'm Paul Bomba,
And I'm John Magerl.
and this is Airwolf to Rewolf.
Do 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 do.
We watched season 1, episode 10, Mind of the Machine.
Mind of the Machine, man. What an episode, John. This was I gotta say, one of my favorites of the whole series thus far.
No, I absolutely agree. I thought it was a great episode. It's such a wonderful, exactly what we needed, I feel like.
Yeah, it was straightforward, it was action packed, there was intrigue, there were bad guys, there were good guys, clear
Yep.
lines.
Yep.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful episode. I loved it. And basically everything revolves around the character Winchester, played by who?
David Carradine.
One of your favorites, as I understand.
Oh, I love David Carradine. He's fantastic. He was on this show, Kung Fu, and then when we were in like high school, I think he was on Kung Fu: The Legend Continues.
But in this show, Mr. Carradine plays a pilot and computer scientist, right? And what he's done is create a basically like a flight simulator
Mm-hmm.
for Airwolf. And we start out where Hawk and Dom and Airwolf, and they're kind of going through a trench. They've got to pull up and they can't, and Airwolf crashes. And then it's revealed to us that, hey, you guys are in the flight simulator,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not right. The Hawk doesn't like it. It's got too much yaw. It's not quite the same. But Carradine is flanked by a lady scientist,
Mm-hmm.
and she's also taking notes and she's making computer modifications. Archangel explains that they want a what we call in the business a hit by a bus insurance policy, where if if Stringfellow Hawk were to be hit by a bus, we need to be able to fly Airwolf. We need to know how it works. And Carradine, who happens to be an excellent copter pilot himself, is also a cutting edge computer scientist, and he's developed this machine to kind of simulate what it would be like to fly Airwolf, and someone could actually train to fly Airwolf in this machine. But the whole premise of the episode is that they want to perfect this machine, and they need Airwolf there, and they need to perform some tests on Airwolf. They need to install some computer components into Airwolf to monitor and track what Airwolf is doing so that they can perfect the machine.
They set up the dynamic of there's a Hawk versus Winchester dynamic where we find out that Winchester was a pilot in the Airwolf program that maybe washed out, maybe was put into a place where his intelligence was better used. There's some vagueness about that. And so we have sort of the Winchester is the smart, tech savvy pilot, and Hawk is the naturally talented pilot. And there's a rivalry there. And Hawk has a lot of like an almost Luddite nature at the beginning of the episode where he's like, technology bad, you know? I don't
Yeah, I
video
think
games stupid, you know.
he calls it a video machine. We play around with the idea of a video game, but he calls it a video machine, which I think is a nice way of doing that. I think next time I play a video game, I'm going to tell my wife, honey, I got to go play the video machine for a little while.
Yeah, it sounds more dignified. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it is. It's better. It's better. Video machine. Okay.
um,
And well, anyway, Hawk agrees. They kind of go through some tests. They do some slaloms. They do some things. But what we don't realize at first is that the assistant, or I don't know if she's really technically assistant. She's just another scientist there.
yeah, Diana Norris is the character's name. It's played by Sandra Curry, who has a wildly long history and was in the Hangover movies recently. And well, she's Diana Norris, and she's Gloriana. Spoiler.
She's also Gloriana, right? So who Gloriana is? That's her Russian name. She's an agent. She is trying to steal information about Airwolf. She is ultimately able to get her hands on some tapes that have the full readout and schematics of Airwolf by downloading it from the Airwolf computer, which is more than meets the eye, as we find out. And she's in cahoots with Provov, which is another Russian agent who's nearby. They kind of have a failed attempt to actually steal Airwolf physically. That goes awry. That alerts Archangel and the firm to there might be some shenanigans going on. Everybody's put under house arrest. During that time, Stringfellow gets a read on Winchester. We learn that Stringfellow has a certain opinion about who Winchester is and whether he should be under house arrest or not. And ultimately, Gloriana is revealed to be this Russian agent, and she asks Winchester, who at this time has already professed his love to her, to come with her to her motherland and take the Airwolf schematics with them. Things go awry. Airwolf saves the day. The schematics never end up in the hands of the Russians. And Winchester is, at the end of the episode, flying Airwolf into the sunset, perhaps for the very last thing he flies in his life.
I don't think it's a perhaps thing. It's a pretty classic spy story. We have, I think it's a honeypot. Like the Winchester and Diana Norris Gloriana are in a relationship. They show that throughout the episode. And then we find out that with Alexei Provov, Gloriana is manipulating him. She is creating this gaslighting both Hawk and Winchester so that they will get into a confrontation to facilitate them stealing Airwolf. The attempt fails. Boom. Right. So then she left a hook in Airwolf's computer systems. And, important reveal, Winchester was close to Moffett. He was part of that program. And
That's
Moffett
true.
had said Airwolf is like a living thing. So and
he actually says, and I'll quote it, Robert being Robert Winchester, Robert, Airwolf is very much like a living thing, more than you can imagine. And that implies either one of two things. Either it's so much like a living thing that no one could even possibly imagine that it is the way it is, or B, Robert Winchester has a very weak imagination.
Which doesn't seem right, because he built the simulator and he's done a bunch of smart stuff. So,
and he also built a laser simulator too. The laser simulator you could actually park Airwolf into, and it will create all of the scenery around Airwolf to make it seem like you're flying through trenches and stuff like that. So much here, John. There's so much here to unpack.
Much. What's important that has been slightly brushed over at this point is that in the attempt to steal the tapes, Alexei shows up and shoots Winchester.
He does. You're right. Yeah, he does.
So,
he shoots Winchester.
So then in the battle, because then they have a dogfight. They make the choice because they could have gotten away. So Alexei and Gloriana are in their own attack helicopter flying away, and they could have gotten away. They also could have shot Archangel. I think that was interesting. I thought it was handled. So they fly. They could get away, but they decide to take on Airwolf because she has the hook in the system and she could turn it off. And they give Winchester a couple cool moments here, right? Where because Hawk likes him now because he showed that he cared about Airwolf first when they tried to steal it the first time. So now he takes care of it. They had a beautiful olive branch moment where he's like, "I want to help you with your simulator now. We're boys. You're cool. We had a duel. You weren't as good as me. I killed you, but you were pretty good. So now we're cool."
And Winchester, to his credit, admits to Gloriana, "Hey, look, he had me. He had me. He made this move. I couldn't keep up with him. I was done." So Winchester at this point also realizes that, hey, maybe he's not the hottest copter pilot in the world, but he's still pretty damn good. Yeah. I mean, he was hanging with Stringfellow for
number
a minute.
2 ain't bad. Number 2 ain't bad, right?
Especially now that Moffett is dead, and last week's episode, what the heck is his name? Anyway, he's dead too.
Vidor
is dead. So I mean, we're killing off top chopper pilots left and right in this show.
Yeah. So this goes back to the Moffett thing, and they use it as a birth allegory to justify there being hidden plans for Airwolf in Airwolf. So then they print them out, and that's what she's stealing. They shoot Carradine, but he's able to help Hawk during the fight. He goes, "Fly cold," and Hawk knows to unplug everything. And she can't mess with him anymore. And once she can't mess with him, Hawk does Hawk stuff, and Gloriana and Alexei go poof.
Yeah,
So
it was a little merciless. I mean, I was a little bit surprised that they just nuked them, but
well, they say,
we like to see exploding helicopters in the show. So I mean,
and they have that moment where he's like, "How's Winchester?" And they say, "Not great." And he says, "Someone will pay for that." So I think there was a little bit of motivated, like, okay, this is done.
right,
So, and then they have the moment where it's like, I already called the hospital helicopter,
right.
but
And what's faster than Airwolf,
what's
John?
faster than Airwolf?
So
And we see Carradine, and he looks really bad, and then he reaches for the yoke, and he lets him have it. You know, he's like, "You're on," and Carradine flies, and then it, by all appearances, appears to die, and then the episode ends.
I got the sense that he. I mean, if you noticed in the costuming or the makeup, he had a really sweaty neck. He was very pale. He had lost a lot of blood at that point. He's dying.
Yeah.
And one last wish is to fly
Airwolf.
The height of human technological achievement for real.
Yeah.
In Airwolf, and he does. And String releases the controls and lets him have it, and that's the end of the episode.
You know,
what a great episode, John.
Yeah, you know, it sounds a little corny. I thought it was really affecting. Like, honestly, like I was sad to see him go. I understood why you make those choices, practically speaking, in a weekly show, because like you're not bringing Carradine back, and you don't want like every time like Hawk is missing to be like, call Carradine. You know, it's not going to be practically possible. So, like, I understand why shows do this, and I thought it was well motivated. I think it made sense for it to be so important to him to get a chance to fly that machine once. Like, I thought it was really good.
I mean, he's been living in this fantasy, playing his video machine for so long that, you know, actually do it for real is probably a great gift that Stringfellow gives. And Stringfellow is such a giver. He really does. He gives a lot.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep it short and sweet because I think really talking about the details is what's more interesting than talking about the plot of this episode, which to me is tight and works. And I have no complaints about the plot.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen episodes where we kind of have to scratch our heads and suspend our disbelief that people would do the things they do.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens all the time in the show. I mean, for various reasons, and not to begrudge the show on it, but in this one just seemed very, very well put together. And I don't know if you noticed, but the director actually wrote the episode. So you had a singularity of vision, and I think that paid off here.
Okay, before we talk too much about it, Paul, why don't we get into our big things?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that I've touched on numerous times as we've gone through these previous, I guess, 11 episodes for us now is how quotable Airwolf can be. Yes. And this episode was chock full of quotable quotes. I mean, it was awesome. I'll just run through a few of them and try to give you a little context on where they were in the episode. And one we just talked about, Robert, Airwolf is very much a living thing, more than you can imagine. I mean, that's very contextually dependent on Airwolf. It's not very particularly quotable, but it is a trope that we've seen many, many times. Something is much more than just a machine. You know, it harkens to Data in Star Trek for me.
Yeah, I really appreciate
Gabriel.
They're doing I think a really good job and a job that a lot of shows like this didn't do. Like in the A-Team, there wasn't a lot of like callbacks to the early episodes and later episodes. You know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if this can continue, but so far, so good, right? And this is before the Shield, obviously. So, you know, and I think of the Shield as the first, you know, you're building season-long arc, right? I mean, I'm sure there are others that predate the Shield, but to me, the Shield was the first really successful one at that, which was still blows me away every time I watch the Shield. But second one, The machines get smarter, men never change. Awesome line. Sort of like, God, what's his name? All right. Matthew McConaughey. And what's that movie? Oh God.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about this? How about this one?
Well, that was said by Gloriana. She was talking about how basically like how easy it is to manipulate the Winchester and Hawk, right? Like
yeah, and further, so when Hawk has his use the Force Luke moment,
yeah,
right? He flies dark, right? He says it's Orville and Wilbur time. I thought that was so great. I loved it. I love that line. and just prior to that, Ernest Borgnine complaining, somebody pulled their teeth. What a great line. I could go on. It's not like you to be sentimental, Gloriana. She says Provov shoots Winchester.
And Gloriana seems regrettable. Like she's like, oh no, why'd you do that? And then he's like, what?
And he's like, did we need him? She says no. And then he's like, it's not like you to be so sentimental, Gloriana. I loved it. And okay. And then there's two more here. In the bar, when we're first revealed that Gloriana is a double agent, she's like talking through the lattice, behind. There's like a booth behind her, to a Provov. And he says, such a brilliant and inventive mind to be swayed by the most basic passions of jealousy and lust. I loved it.
It was a good line. It was perfect, and it just encapsulates the whole episode. Is right there.
Yeah.
Right. Like in that one line.
I don't know if you've ever played Dwarf Fortress, John. It's a video machine. Mm-hmm. At the title screen of Dwarf Fortress, it always has like a little line that explains like what Dwarf Fortress is. Let me just pull it up real quick. And every time it's randomized, right? So I just pulled up Dwarf Fortress and it's saying histories of avarice and labor. What is the program, please? And it's just like me to have a Dwarf Fortress hot barred onto my computer because that's the kind of person that I am. But they'll have histories of jealousy and lust. It's just that really smacked Dwarf Fortress. And then I guess this will be my final quotable quote line. And John, I'm going to ask for permission here for you to excuse me after I say this, but it is. You calling my coyote a sissy?
That was so that was so right where it was.
I will say that I played that scene over a couple of times. And once I called my wife over. I was like, honey, you got to watch this scene. And she's like, what am I watching? I love it.
Oh my God.
Do you know anything about Sam Shepard, the playwright? He's also the same Sam Shepard as Sam Shepard, the actor. But do you know anything about Sam Shepard, the playwright?
I don't think I do. No. Well,
he wrote a play called True West, which famously on Broadway was played by. It's really mostly a 2-actor play. Okay. But John C. Reilly and Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay. So in the casting, I mean, these two characters, they're like polar opposites of each other. Mm-hmm. And they decided at some point, I don't know the full story, but what they did was John C. Reilly and Philip Seymour Hoffman actually switched roles. So on any given night, you might see Reilly or Hoffman in a particular one of the two brothers.
Yeah.
Which is so wild. And they have scenes where they're howling, like the kind of ne'er-do-well brother howls at the moon. Okay. And they talk about the coyotes a lot in the play. And that just reminded me of that play, of the kind of primal nature of being out in the wilderness, in the Southwest and howling at the moon. It was just really cool. I loved it. And yeah, sure, the sexism that's in the scene is strange, but I loved the kind of openness, and I loved the acting in the scene. I thought that we really saw both actors actually connecting, and that's not always happening, in the show. So it was really great to see. That's my first thing.
It was a genuine moment of male bonding. I think, like, if you mute it, it's probably like one of the more beautiful scenes in the show. Like, and it's just the one. It was typical male bonding, jovial, like, language, and sucked at the time, but it was what it was. But otherwise, it was beautiful. Like, it's interesting to feel both ways in that scene, right? Like, it is both things. It is both disappointing, but like a beautiful performance of what appears to be genuine affection between these two men, which is not something that was always presented, particularly in an action show. So I want to give the show credit and a little dig in the side at the same time.
Sure. And how about you, John? What's your first big thing here?
My first big thing is the retro-futurist aesthetic, right? So we get the simulators that are like these perfect video game things that like work beautiful, and then the main thing that set me off was when they hook up Airwolf, they're using these like cables, these snaky cables with the light going through that I believe they must have stolen from the Buck Rogers set. And it reminded me of Star Trek and just all of those. Like, I just love the production. Like, yeah, it looks a little cheesy when you look now, but it brings me back so much to my childhood and watching all those shows. I love the way it looked.
I love that. Is that an actual term, retro-futuristic?
I think so. I think I've heard it. I might have just made it up.
It's very apt.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch the miniseries Maniac?
I didn't. No.
Well, see, here I am bringing up all sorts of weird references today. Maniac.
Oh,
Maniac
yeah, that's so weird. Never happens.
Maniac has like an AI in it, and the AI is it looks like a light bright. You know what I mean? And there's that scene where they're watching the duel between Hawk and Winchester, and at the bottom of the frame is like the computer, and it's like got lights blinking, and it basically looks like a light bright, in the in the bottom, which is so great. That's what a computer is going to do. It's going to have all these lights.
Meanwhile, our computers are like this big. We carry them around. We watch everything on them. You're probably listening to us on a computer right now.
If you think about it, this is 84, right?
Yeah.
And 78 was Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess 83 was 84 Empire Strikes Back. Somewhere right around here. I remember in Hoth, there's like a glass pane, and they're like using like a light pen on the pane.
Yeah.
Right. But and very, very distinctly the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon is like a lot of levers and gauges, but you don't have like a lot of these blinking lights and stuff like this.
This was a TV aesthetic, right? Like, this is more like Battlestar Galactica. Like, they couldn't afford to be as good as Star Wars, so you had this real divide in science fiction and the way it looked. Like, it looks much more like that original Star Trek series and Galactica and Buck Rogers and things like that. And it is sort of what people in the 70s thought the future would look like, and they're still using it in the 80s because it's cheaper. Hey, what's your number 2, buddy?
So, second for me was, I don't know about you, and we've already talked about Dwarf Fortress today, but I also play other kinds of video games. And do you ever play a video game that keeps stats for you?
Yeah, I've played games that keep stats, yeah.
I mean, a video machine. I'm sorry, I should say video machine. But by all accounts, an 87% hit rate is pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
So the perfection that Hawk expects to be utterly insulted by the fact that Diana or Gloriana has given him an 87% hit rate on his machine gun fire is stunning to me. But I guess he's a perfect pilot. So
yeah, and they use that to gaslight him seriously, and also it's delivered in a very sort of like self-righteous, smug way, which I think Hawk doesn't respond well to either. By Gloriana and Winchester, so they
Yeah.
know he was perfect. Well, she knows he was perfect.
Yeah,
She
and
knows
and
real
they're
stuff.
they're obviously fudging the numbers.
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, the computer is wrong."
Yep.
It's one of my favorite things to say to people. Well,
The
that's your
computer's wrong.
opinion, and your opinion is wrong. So that's really it for me. That number 2, that was
Okay.
pretty cut and dried.
Yeah, my number 2 is also pretty cut and dry, and we kind of got through at the beginning. I just love David Carradine. I thought he gave a great performance. It was a pretty clean story. You needed good performances, and they got them.
And that is also my third thing, which is the relationship between Hawk and Winchester, which we have a full arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
We start off as their rivals. They see eye to eye at some point, and then it's actually Hawk that I said earlier. It gives Winchester a gift.
Mm-hmm.
To actually fly Airwolf at the end.
My last big thing is I think it was a well-written episode. I thought it was beat to beat, followed well, breadcrumbed. Every character was well motivated. Everything made sense. Only moment that was like, huh, was when they.
Let me guess.
Go ahead.
They're in the attack helicopter and they fly over the limo, and they choose not to blow up Archangel. Is that it?
That is it.
That's it. It had to be it. But I agreed with you 100% on that, and I actually brought up earlier, which, we're simpatico today.
Yeah,
John.
it's. I think it's the nature of the episode. It's a clean episode. Like you watch it, you're gonna like it. You're gonna like the same things. There's nothing really to pick out. And even that moment, I think, is well motivated because we've seen that Gloriana is regretful, and I think that moment is meant to be a win for Winchester. It's meant to be like she's like, he wouldn't want me to do that. I'm gonna let's just get out of here. David Carradine is just fucking straight charismatic, though, isn't he? Like they kept doing they gave him the hero shots, right? Like the like from below, looking up at him, and you just like watching that face, man.
You do. He's got a. It's interesting because I think about this a lot as an actor, which is how to do as little as possible on camera and still get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And you trick yourself sometimes because you feel like you need to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes you don't. Carradine has a very elegant stillness about him, which makes for wonderful performances because you get hooked on him right away. You can't not look at him.
Well, the big things are over, Paul, so let's get to the 80s. You got anything?
Well, my 80s thing was one of your big things, I guess your second big thing, which was the wiring and the tubes and the lights and the light bright and the retro-futuristic vibe of what technology is going to be. Yeah. So that's for me, the 80s. Your 80s?
The one last thing was just Harvey Jason, who played Alexei Provov. And it was just a typical sort of 80s Russian performance. He's really sort of like, he's the least I would call naturalistic, and this isn't a criticism. He was doing exactly what they wanted him to do, and doing the perfect voice that they wanted. But like looking back at it, this is a very 80s Russian guy arch performance that he did a lot of in the 80s. If you go through his IMDb, he worked quite a bit. Still working, it looked like, and just I think he stands out, and I think he stands out this performance stands out as a bit of a relic of its time.
All right. Well, that's all there is to it, John. I'd really love for you guys to like and subscribe.
Guys, hit that like, hit that subscribe, comment below. All right, folks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.